The wind screamed outside, carrying the icy dust of the alien desert. Inside his small shelter, Evan sat near the dim heater, watching the shadows move on the metal walls. Nights on this planet were dangerous. The cold could kill in minutes, and the wild creatures could kill even faster. He had learned to lock every door, seal every crack, and never open for strangers after sunset that night. He thought it would be the same as any other silence, cold and the distant sound of the storm. But then he heard it, a faint scratching at the door, like claws dragging on metal. At first he thought it was the wind, but the sound came again, sharper this time. His hand went to the old rifle leaning against the wall. Nobody should be outside now, not in this storm. He moved slowly toward the door, boots silent on the steel floor. The scratching stopped, replaced by a metallic click, the sound of the airlock controls being touched. Evan's heart tightened. He had locked the outer hatch. Nobody could open it without his code, or so he thought. The hiss of escaping air filled the room, the airlock door sliding open against the force of the wind. Cold rushed in, making the lights flicker. Through the doorway stumbled a small figure. Wrapped in torn cloth, soaked from the storm, she fell to her knees, her thin body shaking hard. Before Evan could speak, she crawled across the floor. Moving like she had been here before, she reached his bed, pulled the blanket aside, and without a word curled up against the far wall of it, her back pressed to him as if she had claimed that spot her whole life. Evan froze, rifle still in hand. Her breathing was shallow, her skin, what little he could see, was pale with faint blue. Lines glowing under it, definitely not human. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low. No answer, only a small, tired sound. She shivered again. Pulling the blanket tighter around herself, the storm outside roared louder, making the walls groan. Evan stood there for a long moment, unsure what to do. Throw her out, and she would die in minutes. Keep her inside, and he might be letting danger into his home. But something in the way she trembled made him hesitate. Her hands were small, her clothes torn, her bare feet scratched and bleeding. This was no armed threat. This was someone running from something. Evan slowly set the rifle down and closed. The inner airlock door, the heater hummed again, pushing the cold back. He sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to touch her. For a while, they stayed like that, silent except for the storm. Every now and then, she made a soft sound, like she was half dreaming, half afraid. Her breathing slowly grew steadier, her shaking less violent. Evan could feel her warmth through the blanket now. Still, his mind was racing. Why had she come here, in the middle of the worst storm in weeks? How had she bypassed his lock? And why did she act like curling up next to him was the most natural thing in the world? He looked toward the door, his instincts telling him to stay alert. If someone was chasing her, they might not be far behind. He checked the security monitor. The screen was full of static. The storm too strong for the cameras to work. That meant he had no warning if someone approached. He leaned back, listening. The wind howled, but underneath it, for a second, he thought he heard something else. A low, distant thud, like heavy steps on frozen ground. His eyes narrowed. Whatever had brought her here might still be out there, moving closer through the storm, and in his small shelter, there was only one bed. And now, somehow, she had made it hers. The heater hummed softly as pale morning light slipped through the narrow window. Evan opened his eyes. The storm outside had quieted, but the silence felt heavier than before. Something warm pressed against his side, and for a second, he thought it was just the blanket bunched up. Then he remembered. The intruder. He turned his head and saw her, still curled up. Still holding the blanket like she was afraid it would be taken away. Her skin looked different in the light pale, almost silver, with soft blue lines running beneath the surface, glowing faintly like rivers of light. Her hair, tangled and damp, had a strange shimmer. Catching the light and shifting colors, she was not human. No doubt about it. Evan sat up, and the movement made her eyes snap open. For a moment, she looked at him like a cornered animal. Then, in a voice rough and broken, she whispered, "Don't. Send me out." Her accent was strange, each word careful, like she had learned them one at a time. Evan frowned. "Who are you?" She hesitated, eyes darting toward the door. "Lyra," she said finally, the name almost a sigh. Her hands clutched the blanket tighter, as if letting go meant losing something important. Evan glanced at her feet, scratched, swollen, the skin cracked from cold and rough ground. She must have been out there for days. "You shouldn't be here," he said. But there was no force in his voice. "I can't go," she replied. Her gaze never leaving the door, the way she watched it made him uneasy, like she was expecting it to burst open at any second. He stood and moved to the small metal counter. Heating some water, the smell of warm broth filled the shelter, and he noticed her eyes follow every movement when he set the bowl in front of her. She didn't wait for him to say anything. She ate fast, like someone who hadn't tasted food in days, between hurried bites. She kept glancing toward the door. "They will come," she murmured under her breath. Evan's hand tightened on the cup he was holding. "Who?" She didn't answer right away, swallowing the last of the broth before speaking. "Hunters," she said softly. "They chase me." Evan had heard the word before, whispered in trading posts, usually followed by silence. Hunters didn't just track animals, they tracked people for reasons most didn't want to know. He studied her. "Why are they after you?" Her jaw tightened, and she looked away. "I left," she said simply. "They don't let you leave." She shifted her injured leg, wincing. It was then Evan noticed something else. A faint mark on the side of her neck. A brand, not just burned into the skin, but glowing faintly like the patterns in her veins. Whatever she had been part of, it had owned her. Evan felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. If the hunters wanted her back, they would not knock, they would take. He moved to the small security panel and tapped the screen. Static. The storm had cut his sensors completely. That meant no warning if someone approached. Lyra's eyes flicked to the window, then back to him. "We can't stay here," she said, voice low. "You can't stay here." Evan corrected, her lips pressed into a thin line. "If I go, they find me. If I stay, they find you." Before he could reply, she suddenly stiffened, her head tilting like she heard something. Evan heard it too, faint, muffled through the walls. But there, a crunch of boots on frozen ground, slow, deliberate. Lyra's hand shot out and gripped his arm, stronger than he expected. Her glowing lines pulsed faintly, matching the fast beat of her heart. "They're here," she whispered. The sound outside came again, slow and heavy. Like someone walking through deep snow. Evan froze, his hand hovering over the rifle leaning against the wall. Lyra's grip on his arm was tight. Her glowing lines brighter now, almost pulsing with fear. "They don't knock," she whispered. "They listen first." Evan moved silently toward the small viewing slit in the door. But the storm's frost had coated the glass, blurring the world outside into shifting white shapes. He could see only shadows moving through the mist. 2, maybe 3 figures. The steps stopped, replaced by silence so deep he could hear the faint hum of the heater. Lyra was crouched low now, her eyes locked on the door, her breathing shallow. "They will smell me," she said softly, "even through the walls." Evan didn't ask how. He had seen enough strange things on this planet to believe her. A sharp knock shattered the silence. It wasn't gentle. It was the kind of knock that dared you to ignore it. Evan glanced at Lyra, who shook her head violently, mouthing the word no. He stepped to the door anyway. Rifle at his side, from the other side, a deep voice called, "We're looking for a runaway." Evan kept his tone calm. "No one here but me." The voice was closer now. Like the speaker had leaned in. Small female, pale skin, marked dangerous thief. Lyra's hands balled into fists. Her lips pressed together so tightly they were almost white. Evan said nothing. A second voice joined the first, sharper, impatient. "We have orders. Human, if you hand her over. We pay. If you hide her, you pay more." The offer made his jaw tighten through the blurred glass. One of the figures shifted, revealing the glint of armor, the long curve of a weapon slung across its back. Evan's gut told him these weren't just soldiers. They were predators. "I haven't seen anyone," he said at last, his voice steady. There was a long pause. Then the first voice said, "Storm will clear soon. We will return." Footsteps crunched away, fading into the white mist. Evan turned back to Lyra, but she was still frozen in place, her eyes following something beyond the walls. "They don't leave," she said finally. "They circle. They wait for the dark." Evan checked the door locks again, though he knew it wouldn't stop determined hunters. He walked to the storage shelf, pulling out extra thermal blankets, handing one to her. "You need to rest," he said. But his mind was already working. On another plan, she didn't move, just stared at the floor. "They think I stole something," she murmured. "I didn't steal. I took back." He looked at her sharply. "What?" Her eyes met his then, and he felt the weight in them. "Coordinates," she said quietly. "To a lost ship, human ship, hidden in the ice mountains." Evan's breath caught. He had heard the stories, a human vessel gone missing years ago, rumored to hold tech far beyond what the colonies had now. "If they get it," she continued, "they destroy it before humans can reach it." Evan understood then, this wasn't just her fight, it was his too. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, outside. The storm still whispered against the walls, but now he knew the wind wasn't the only thing moving out there. The hunters were close, patient, and they would not leave without her. Evan checked the charge on his rifle. If they came back tonight, he would be ready, but deep inside, he knew the shelter might not hold when they returned. The wind returned with sudden force by late afternoon, howling against the walls like a living thing. Evan kept glancing at the door, half expecting it to open on its own. Lyra stayed in the corner, her blanket wrapped tight, eyes distant as if counting the hours. When the knock came again, it wasn't a warning, it was a command. 3 hard blows, shaking the metal frame. Evan moved to the viewing slit. Wiping away frost with his sleeve, 2 figures stood outside. Clearer now that the stormlight was fading. Both wore heavy black armor with ridged plates and a faint blue glow under the joints. Their helmets had narrow visors like staring eyes. One of them stepped forward, lifting the visor just enough to show pale skin and sharp, angular features. "We search again," the figure said, voice flat. Evan kept his own face still. "You already searched with your eyes this morning." The warrior's lips twitched. Not a smile, but something colder. This time, inside, behind Evan, Lyra shifted, and he could feel her fear like a pulse in the air. "I don't open my door in storms," Evan replied, but his voice carried more steel than before. The second figure leaned closer to the door, his breath fogging the small glass. "We smell her," he said softly. Evan's grip tightened on the door handle. If he refused, they might force their way in. If he allowed them in, they would see her immediately. Lyra moved silently toward the narrow storage hatch at the back, sliding inside and closing it, just enough to leave a crack. Evan opened the inner lock, keeping his rifle low but ready. The 2 stepped in, the storm wind curling around them like a cloak. Snow hissed against the floor as they scanned the small room, their armor humming with each movement. "Cold in here," the first one said, though the heater was working. "You live alone?" Evan nodded. "Always." The second one moved toward the bed, his boots heavy on the steel, his visor passed over every corner. Lingering on the blanket thrown across the mattress, Evan's voice cut through the sound of the wind. "If you came to trade, I have nothing you want." The first one looked at him, visor reflecting the heater's orange glow. "You have exactly what we want." He stepped closer until only the rifle between them kept space. Evan didn't blink. "You're wasting your time," he said. "Storm will bury your tracks. Go home." The second one gave a slow tilt of the head. "We don't leave tracks." The words made the hair rise on the back of Evan's neck. They walked a slow circle of the room, touching nothing, speaking little. When they reached the door again, the first paused, turning his head slightly as if listening to something beyond the walls. Then, with no more than a short nod, they stepped. Outside, the wind swallowed them in seconds. Evan locked the door fast, sealing the airlock again. The hatch at the back creaked open and Lyra slipped out, her eyes wide and her hands trembling. "They know," she whispered. "They didn't take me now. Because they want the dark to hide the blood?" Evan checked the rifle again, the weight of the decision pressing harder on him. The shelter had kept him safe for years, but it might not last one more night. And if what she said about the ship was true, leaving her behind wasn't just betrayal. It was giving the hunters exactly what they wanted. He met her gaze. "We move tonight." She blinked, as if she hadn't expected him to say it. "They will follow," she warned. Evan nodded. "Then we make sure we're worth the chase." Evan moved quickly once the decision was made. The storm outside had grown heavier, which meant the hunters would wait, but not for long. They were patient predators, circling, measuring. Knowing their prey would eventually move, Lyra followed him as he crossed the small shelter, pulling open metal crates and grabbing what he needed: ration packs, thermal flares, extra water cells. She stood silently, blankets still around her shoulders, but her sharp eyes scanned every item like she was weighing its worth. "You travel light," she said softly. "Light enough to move fast," he replied. Without looking up, she glanced toward the door. Fast is not enough for them. Evan zipped the last pack shut and checked the charge on his rifle, then handed her a small sidearm. She looked at it, hesitant. "I don't like killing." "Then use it to keep yourself alive," he said. Her fingers closed around the grip, the blue glow under her skin flickering faintly as she held it. The storm wind rattled the walls, a low, deep sound, and for a moment they both froze, listening, but it was only the shifting air. No footsteps yet. Evan knelt near the floor hatch, pulling out a rolled map printed on worn, flexible film. He spread it across the table. A jagged line of mountains ran along the far edge, their peaks marked with warning symbols. "That's where the ship is," Lyra said, pointing to a small star in the ice range hidden under the glacier. He traced the distance with his finger, measuring the route in his mind. "We can make it in 2 days if we move without stopping," he said. 3 if the weather turns bad." Her gaze didn't leave the map. "The weather here always turns bad." Evan folded the map away and clipped it to his belt. "Then we move faster," he said. Lyra shifted her weight, wincing slightly from her injured leg. Evan noticed. "You can walk." She nodded, though he could see the truth in the way she avoided putting full weight on it. "I can run if I must," she said, her voice firm. They worked in silence for a while, the shelter's heater humming softly. Evan packed the last of the supplies into a thermal-lined bag and slung it over his shoulder. Lyra moved toward the small window, pressing her hand against the frost, through the thin ice. She could just make out shapes moving in the distance, dark forms that blended with the storm's shadows. "They're watching," she whispered. Evan joined her at the window, his eyes narrowing. The figures were still, too still, as if they were part of the landscape. Then one of them turned slightly, and even through the haze, Evan saw the faint blue line of armor light. "They're closer than before," he said quietly. "Lyra's Voice was low. "They want us to know they are there." Evan turned away, his jaw tight. "They think fear will slow us," he said. "They're wrong." He moved to the heater and shut it off, letting the temperature inside drop fast. Lyra looked at him, confused. "If they follow our heat signature," he explained, "I'd rather give them nothing to track until we're gone." She nodded slowly, pulling the blanket tighter. They sat for a moment in the growing cold, listening to the wind. Then, far away but cutting through the storm, came a long, low sound. Not the wind, not any creature Evan knew, a hunter's call. Lyra's hand tightened on the small pistol. Evan stood, slinging his rifle. "We leave when the wind shifts west," he said. "It'll cover our trail for the first mile." She nodded, but her eyes didn't leave the door. As the hours passed, the storm began to tilt. The winds howl, changing direction. Evan opened the airlock quietly, cold air rushing in like a wave. Snow swirled into the room, sticking to their boots. Lyra stepped forward, limping slightly, but her shoulders squared. The world outside was a wall of white and shadows. Evan glanced once over his shoulder at the shelter, his home for years, knowing he would likely never see it again. Then he stepped into the storm. Lyra close behind, somewhere in the snow, the hunters moved too, silent and sure, waiting for their chance. The storm wrapped around them like a living thing. Snow stung Evan's face, the wind pulling at his coat. Lyra followed close. Her small frame bent against the gusts, her glowing lines faint under the layers she wore. The world was only white and shadow, no horizon, no clear path, but Evan moved. With purpose, counting each step, keeping the mountains in his mind. The storm's howl was so loud, he almost missed it. A crunch, heavier than their own footsteps, somewhere behind. He didn't turn. "Not yet. Keep moving," he said. Over the wind, Lyra's eyes darted to the side, her breath quickening. Then, without warning, a shape burst from the snow ahead. Black armor, blue visor, moving fast. Evan swung his rifle up and fired, the shot exploding against the figure's chest plate. The hunter staggered, but didn't fall, closing the distance in long, sure strides from behind. Another shadow rose from the snow. A second hunter, their weapon raised. Evan grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her sideways, diving into the deeper drift beside a jagged rock. Snow exploded where they had stood a second earlier. The hunters didn't speak, didn't shout. They moved like the storm itself, silent and relentless. Lyra pulled the small pistol from her coat, her hands trembling but her aim steady. When the first hunter rounded the rock, she fired twice, the shots ringing sharp in the frozen air. One blast caught the visor, cracking it, and the figure dropped to one knee. Evan didn't waste the moment. His rifle kicked hard against his shoulder, the shot slamming into the hunter's chest and sending them down into the snow. The second hunter lunged from behind, a blade catching the dull light. Evan turned just in time, blocking the strike with the rifle's body. The impact jarring. Through his arms, they grappled in the snow, boots digging into ice, the cold biting through their gloves. The hunter's strength was brutal, forcing Evan back inch by inch. Then Lyra was there, small but fast, leaping onto the hunter's back and driving the pistol hard against the joint in their neck armor. The shot hissed more than it cracked, and the hunter fell forward. Evan pushed them off and pulled Lyra to her feet. She was breathing hard, the blue glow under her skin bright with adrenaline. "They'll send more," she said. Evan scanned the white void around them, nothing but the storm. But he knew she was right. The hunters didn't stop until they had their quarry. He slung the rifle again. "We move?" They pushed forward, legs burning from the fight. And the cold, the snow was deeper here, and the wind sharper. Every few steps, Evan looked back, half expecting to see more figures in the storm. but it stayed empty, for now. Lyra's limp was worse, her pace slowing. Evan shifted his pack and bent down. "Get on," he said. She shook her head. "You'll slow down? We don't." "Have time to argue?" he replied. After a moment, she climbed onto his back, light as she was. Her arms around his shoulders, the storm roared louder, swallowing their tracks as soon as they made them. Somewhere far behind, a sound rose, a low rising tone that didn't belong to the wind. A call. Evan didn't need to ask what it meant. The hunters had found the trail again. He gritted his teeth and pushed harder. The mountains, a feint. Shadow ahead, the fight had bought them minutes, maybe less, and in this storm, minutes were life or death. The mountains loomed closer now, jagged shadows rising from the white haze. Evan's legs burned with each step. The weight of Lyra on his back and the storm pressing against him like a wall. Her arms clung to him, not from fear alone, but as if letting go meant the world would swallow her. The wind cut through their clothes, but he kept moving, each step carrying them away from the hunters. Behind them, the storm hid the shapes that followed. But he could still feel it. The chase hadn't ended. It had only gone quiet. Lyra's voice was faint near his ear. "They will not stop." Evan's breath came in clouds. "Neither will we for a while." They said nothing more, only the sound of boots breaking snow and the distant growl of shifting ice. At the edge of a frozen ridge, Evan stopped, setting her down carefully. "From here." The view opened valleys of ice, cliffs that cut the sky, and far ahead, a faint glimmer of light under the glacier. Lyra followed his gaze. "That is where the ship sleeps." He studied the distance. The way the storm funneled through the mountain pass. It was beautiful and deadly, all at once. Lyra's leg trembled as she stood, but she didn't ask to rest. "Once we reach it," she said, "I can send a signal to your people." Evan glanced at her, "And yours." Her eyes shifted away. "I have no people now." The words were quiet, but heavy. He adjusted the rifle on his shoulder. "Then you have me." She looked at him for a long moment, now the wind lifting strands of her shimmering hair. A sound broke the moment, faint but sharp against the wind. Evan turned, scanning the white movement far back. "Like shadows flowing over the ridge they had left, they've closed the gap," he said. Lyra's jaw tightened. "Then we go through the hollow." She pointed toward a dark break in the mountainside. "A narrow canyon half buried in snow. It will hide us from sight," she added, "but the cold there is worse than this." Evan gave a small grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We've had worse nights." They pushed into the canyon, the walls rising on either side, black rock coated with ice. The wind funneled through in sharp bursts, carrying snow. Like shards of glass, the path narrowed until they were forced to walk single file, their footprints vanishing almost as soon as they made them. It was there, in the dim half-light, that Lyra slowed, her head tilting as if listening to something. Beneath the wind. "They are not behind anymore," she said. Evan frowned. Then, where a shape dropped from the canyon wall ahead, landing in the snow with the grace of a predator. Hunter armor, visor glowing faintly. Second dropped behind them, cutting off the path. The storm's roar filled the narrow space. But in that moment, it felt like silence. Evan stepped forward, rifle raised. "You'll have to take her over my dead body." The front hunter's visor tilted, voice low and almost amused. "That is the plan." Lyra moved to Evan's side. Pistol in hand, her glowing lines burning bright in the shadows. The first shot came like lightning, and the canyon became chaos. Snow exploded. Echoes crashed between the walls, and the fight closed in. Evan's rifle barked again and again, Lyra's small pistol answering each shot. The rear hunter lunged, but Evan drove his shoulder into them, forcing them into the wall with a crunch. Lyra's shot found the front hunter's visor, shattering it, and the figure went down. The others stumbled in the snow, trying to rise. Evan didn't give them the chance. Silence returned. Only the wind filling the canyon again. They stood there, breathing hard, snow melting on their faces. Lyra looked at him. They'll send more. Evan nodded. His voice steady. Let them. They left the canyon and pushed toward the glacier. The faint glimmer growing stronger with each step by the time they reached its edge. The sky had shifted the storm, easing into a pale twilight. The ice beneath them hummed faintly, as if something ancient waited below. Lyra placed her hand against it, her glowing lines pulsing in answer. Evan watched her, his chest still rising and falling with the fight's aftershock. She looked back at him, a small, tired smile on her face. Your ship will wake, he gave a short nod. And when it does, the galaxy will know why humans are never easy prey. Together. They stepped toward the hidden entrance, the storm, fading behind them, but the hunt far from over, and for the first time since the night she broke into his shelter. Evan realized they were no longer just running, they were beginning something,